So after the recent report about BioWare's, well, pretty shaky future, I've seen that a lot of you are wondering if we're ever gonna see the next Mass Effect game at all. And well, I don't blame you, because that report was pretty brutal. So, what now? Well, don't you worry, my friends, because if you zoom out just a little bit, you will see that there are other studios that are making games that are very similar to Mass Effect in nature. Hell, some of them even have former BioWare devs working on them. And while none of these games are trying to copy Mass Effect exactly, they are very much building on the same DNA that we love, you know, heavy narrative focus, squad-based RPG mechanics, player choice, and of course, big, ambitious sci-fi universes. So today I want to take a look at these upcoming projects that I'm very much excited for myself, and if nothing else, these games might hold us over until we know what's going on with BioWare and the next Mass Effect game. But I gotta tell you, one of these games could very much turn out to be the sci-fi RPG of the current generation. Now, let's start with the one that took us all by surprise recently, that being The Expanse: Osiris Reborn. Now, this is the most on-the-nose Mass Effect successor yet. It's being made by Owlcat Games, yup, the same studio that did Pathfinder and Rogue Trader, and this time they're going all in to basically build a full-on third-person squad RPG inside the Expanse universe. Now the setting seems pretty clever, as instead of getting some kind of weird reboot or sequel, they actually slot the game's timeline during that of The Expanse's first few seasons. And so you are playing as a Pinkwater security officer who just happens to be on Eros Station right as everything goes to hell, and if you know your Expanse lore, well, you know exactly what kind of nightmare that turns into. So after barely surviving, you end up with the most advanced chip in the system and getting pulled into a massive conspiracy involving the proto-molecule, corporate black ops, and all that usual political tension that makes The Expanse what it is. Now, what really makes Osiris Reborn so very interesting, and the reason why it's getting so many Mass Effect comparisons, aside from the devs obviously saying that they were inspired by Mass Effect, is the structure. So first of all, this is a full-blown squad-based RPG as you build a team of companions, each with their own backstory, loyalty system, and even romance options. Yep.
We're bang, okay?
Your crew is going to be made up by Belters, Martians, Earthers, you know, all with their own baggage and motivations, and your choices will actually shift how loyal they are, who sticks around, and how certain outcomes play out later. Now, to no one's surprise, the game is third-person action combat mixed with modern shooter design. You're taking two squad mates into every mission, issuing them commands mid-fight, using special abilities, setting up flanks, and on top of that, some fights even play out in 0G. Now, that one's gonna be crazy, and I can't wait to see that. So you've got mag boots, you're walking on walls, floating in debris fields, and it's actually using the physics of The Expanse in a way that we really haven't seen in an RPG before. I think Dead Space is the only game that I can think of that used 0G segments throughout the game, so it's probably gonna be somewhat similar to that. Now, the world design of Osiris Reborn also looks solid. However, it's not fully open world, but it's semi-open with the different hub zones you travel to using your ship, and you'll visit places like Ceres, Ganymede, Luna, Mars, all while dealing with the usual faction politics between Earth, Mars, and the Belt. And now because it's running on Unreal Engine 5, the visuals are actually looking pretty damn sharp here, especially for Owlcat's first third-person project. And now here's a big one for all of you Expanse fans, because this isn't an isolated side story. Apparently, it actively ties into the main Expanse timeline because they have confirmed familiar characters from the show will show up, and they've got actors reprising their roles for certain cameos. So, you know, if you're deep into the Expanse lore, this one's probably going to be packed with a lot of references and callbacks. Now, this game is going to be a pretty big, ambitious swing for Owlcat Games, but given how good they've been at handling RPG systems in Rogue Trader and Pathfinder, I'm actually feeling pretty optimistic here. There's no release date yet for this one, but it's gonna release on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. Alright, now let's talk about Exodus: Become the Traveler. And yeah, the studio that's making this game is basically just BioWare reincarnated at this point. And the studio's name is Archetype Entertainment, which was founded by James Olin, you know, the guy who led development on Baldur's Gate, KOTOR, Dragon Age Origins, and he also worked on Mass Effect. And he's not the only one, as they've got Drew Karpyshyn on board, who was the lead writer on Mass Effect 1 and 2 and Knights of the Old Republic, and then we have Chad Robertson, who also worked on BioWare for about 9 years. These are just a couple of names among the team because they've built a pretty solid studio over the years, but essentially it's being led by some of the people that were responsible for BioWare's golden age. Now, the pitch for Exodus is really wild, and I absolutely love it. So it's set like 40,000 years into the future, where humanity scattered into these different offshoots called Celestials. Basically, these evolved genetically modified human factions that have branched off after thousands of years of space colonization. Now, you're playing as June Aslan, a hybrid between regular old humans and these Celestials, and you're basically leading humanity's last real shot at survival inside this massive, hostile galactic empire. The big hook, though, is the time dilation system, because every time you go on one of your long interstellar expeditions, you're traveling near light speed. So while you're out there for a couple of weeks, decades are passing back home, which is a really cool concept. So when you return, things have obviously changed. People have aged, power structures have shifted, relationships have evolved or broken down, and your decisions beforehand start snowballing in ways you couldn't fully predict. At least, that is what Archetype has said. As James Olin even mentioned in interviews, that this isn't actually just a gimmick, because the entire narrative structure is built around those long gaps between missions. You'll constantly be balancing how much time you spend away versus how urgently you need to get back before things fall apart. Outside of that though, like structurally speaking, it's very Mass Effect-ish. You're building a squad of companions, all with their own arcs, personalities, and backgrounds, and again, there's romance.
We're bang, okay?
There's loyalty quests, branching, dialogue, everything else that you'd expect from a developer like this. But on top of that, a lot of your companions aren't even really human anymore. Like, you're recruiting people from these celestial subspecies, so you're gonna have these hybrids with different abilities, cultures, and very different views on humanity's future. It's all very interesting stuff. Now, combat-wise, we've only seen glimpses of it so far, but it's definitely that third-person squad-based structure. You have cover shooting, high-tech abilities, some stealth elements. Like, it looks a little more tactical, but still fully real-time action, and it's apparently very fluid, because the footage we got from the gameplay trailer showcased June being pretty nimble while fighting that awakened bear. Like, you can use like a slingshot to move over to platforms and stuff like that. It's looking pretty impressive. Speaking of bears, there are these hyper-intelligent animals that are called the Awakened, and for more info on that, you can check out my lore video right here. In any case, it's clearly borrowing from the Mass Effect combat loop while trying to layer in a bit more danger, because apparently you will be very underpowered against some of the enemies you're facing, like the bear here, so stealth and positioning might actually matter a lot more than we think. Of course, we gotta mention this because the world building is absolutely insane. I'm not kidding, it actually is. James Olin has been posting tons of information about the various species, factions, and technology on Twitter, and this is apparently only a small little taste of what's to come. And after having read all of these excerpts, I gotta say, I am genuinely impressed. Like, this universe could absolutely dwarf Mass Effect in terms of scale. Also, I gotta mention this, it's not a fully open galaxy like a No Man's Sky game, like a few people have actually wondered. No, it's all handcrafted, specific locations spread across multiple star systems, pretty much just like in Mass Effect. And each expedition you take is essentially a targeted mission where you're leaving home, venturing deep into hostile territory, you know, trying to steal alien tech or intel and then racing back before too much time passes. Now, from a pure lore perspective, this might be one of the hardest sci-fi takes I've seen in gaming. Everything from the way evolution's treated to the way time dilation affects narrative, you can actually tell that Archetype are leading heavily into real science to really, like, frame the fiction. It's not aliens for the sake of aliens, because most of the species that you'll interact with are actually just hyper-evolved versions of humanity, which makes everything feel super grounded in a way and somewhat personal. Oh, by the way, Matthew McConaughey's in it, and apparently he has a huge role for the entirety of the game. So, hey, fans of Matthews, there you go. Now, we don't have an exact release date yet, but according to Hasbro in one of their earnings calls, it'll be out next year by 2026. And again, yes, this one is also coming to PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. But to be real with you guys, with the team behind this game, this is probably the game that most Mass Effect fans have their eyes on. I know I do. It's basically BioWare's old DNA, but outside of EA's control this time. Alright, so before we wrap this up, I want to throw in one more here that might not seem like Mass Effect in terms of style, at least not at first glance. But after playing it a ton this past week, I have to say, Dune Awakening actually shares more DNA with Mass Effect than people probably thought. Yes, at its core, Dune Awakening is a survival MMO. I get it. That's usually where a lot of you immediately check out. But here's the thing, it's not a traditional theme park MMO where you grind dailies forever. This one's actually built around proper faction dynamics, political intrigue, dialogue scenes, which weirdly enough makes it feel a lot closer to the vibe Mass Effect was always going for, just with a different structure in a different genre. Now, Dune Awakening is not about farming mobs, it's about farming minerals. Uranus. Seriously though, you can align with the different factions like the Atreides, you make enemies, form alliances, and take part in these larger power struggles that are constantly shifting based on player politics. It's still early in its life cycle, so things are evolving constantly, but you can already feel that vibe that Mass Effect has. Especially when you're out and just exploring the planet of Arrakis, it almost feels like those moments when you venture out on an unknown planet in the first Mass Effect game and you explore. It has that similar feeling. I mean, you're even driving around in a similar vehicle at one point if you craft one called the Buggy, and you know, it's so similar in many ways in terms of exploration at least. And just turning on the Mass Effect Galaxy Map soundtrack when you're out driving and exploring the planet, it's such a cozy feel and it just brings you back, man. So if you're looking for something to take you away for a little bit, or maybe have you relive that nostalgia of playing Mass Effect 1 for the first time, then you should definitely try this. Now obviously, Dune Awakening is not fully narrative-driven like Exodus or The Expanse, like you're not recruiting a squad of companions and flying around the galaxy, but it's absolutely scratching a very similar itch, just through a different lens. Again, the future is looking pretty uncertain on Mass Effect as a franchise and BioWare as a studio, and we're probably gonna have to wait until the 7th of November, that being the International N7 Day, to get an actual update on the state of the game. But even if that doesn't happen, we have these other games to keep us occupied, and personally, I think this is just the beginning of Mass Effect-inspired games, because seemingly more and more developers want to do sci-fi. And what better franchise to take inspiration from than the king of sci-fi RPGs. Anyway, that's gonna be it for today. Let me know which one of these games you're excited for the most. And as always, have a great day. Mr. Alton, signing off.